going to get the PowerPoint ready and start my video. Okay. And are we recording? We are recording. Fantastic. All right. Welcome, everyone. It is 3 o'clock London time on Thursday, April 18, 2019. And this is the second day of the FoodTreX Global Online Food Travel Summit. And I am delighted that you were able to join us. And for those who could not join us today, you're missing some great stuff, but you're hearing it later by recording. So you're really not missing that much, except the live questions. Anyway, I would also like to draw attention to the fact that today is World Food Travel Day. So whatever you are doing around the world in your communities and your areas, tell us how you're celebrating World Food Travel Day. Just use the hashtag World Food Travel Day. It's that simple. And let us know, and we will share and like whatever you share and like. It's all a day dedicated to the celebration and awareness of culinary cultures around the world. So without further ado, I'm going to go straight into this particular presentation, which is one that I'm going to be giving. And I won't be doing any kind of introduction of myself because I think most of you probably know who I am, and you don't need to know any more of my biography than I am who I am. I'm the Executive Director of the World Food Travel Association, and that's all there is to it. Right, so let's get started. Today, we're going to be talking about developing a sustainable gastronomic tourism destination. Now, there is a lot of content today. I expect this presentation to probably go 40 minutes. So if you have questions during this presentation, please be sure to write them into the chat window. And all of the questions will be moderated by Jane, who is lurking in the background and taking care of any of your guest needs today. But there's a lot of information, and I would just say that if there's anything on a slide that really speaks to you, go ahead and take a screenshot of the screen. Not everything in this presentation is going to be transposed into the key takeaways, so if anything that you'd like, go ahead and take a photo. So we're going to be making some certain assumptions. Obviously, if you're in this particular session today, this is not an entry-level topic. So we assume that you already know what food tourism is, what the different meanings, how they vary between food tourism, gastronomy tourism, culinary tourism, and so on, that you already know who food travelers are and the benefits of working with food tourism, that you understand the wide scope of the interrelated industry sectors that are involved, that you probably work with or for a destination marketing organization or government, and even if you're a small business owner in your community, you are probably working with your own tourism office, and that you understand what the word sustainability means in its context in tourism development, but we also will share our own definition with you later. Now, the first things we're going to be looking at are issues for destinations. Then we'll be looking at some of the opportunities that we see for destinations as well as components of your strategy. And then we will be wrapping up with your questions. So let's look first at issues. There is something in food tourism that we call the food tourism destination life cycle. And this is something that our organization created several years ago to help destinations to understand how food tourism can be developed in your area, but also what is at risk if you don't continue to monitor things and develop things as food tourism becomes popular in your area. So the whole concept is basically that you start at a spot on this continuum. And at the lower part of the screen here, you'll see the big gold star. That is where a destination starts. So phase one is food tourism is not even on the radar. You're not known as a food destination. Probably the locals don't even think of the area as a food destination. Things are just, there might be some initial indications that there's potential, like some ingredients, or maybe you're near a wine region or something, but nothing's really happening. Phase two is when things are starting to percolate. There is some momentum building. Chefs might be working with local ingredients and using them in the restaurants. There are more restaurants being opened. People are starting to, I would say, really the early adopter type food lovers are starting to listen and hear rumors about what might be going on in your area. Phase three is when you're in your heyday. This is when your destination is doing a great job. It's known as a food destination. And there's early phases and late phases of phase three as well. So you might just be coming into being known about it, but then once you've been there for a while, then your destination is fully known by food lovers and non-food lovers alike. And you actually then could start to risk losing that reputation which there's several destinations I can think of whose names I'm not going to mention, but I think that they are in serious jeopardy of losing their reputation as a food lovers haven because of things that happen when a destination becomes too popular. And it's not just over tourism, but there's a lot more to it, and we don't really have time to go into a lot of that today. But we do see that there is a correlation between the destination size and the economic impact that is available. So you look at something like a rural area, which is a huge area, or a designated region, which might be a wine valley or something like that, to smaller cities to mega cities. So it's the rural areas that have the huge geography, but it's the big cities that have the biggest economic impact. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword here, and both really are needed to complete the food-loving traveler's overall experience of satisfaction. Now, we're going to be looking at some of the issues for each of these regions, and not just the positives, but also some of the negative things that need to be looked at. So, one of the positive things about rural areas is that's where the people are. That's where the real people are. That's where the history still is. That's where the farms are and where agriculture is. And this is where people can get back to how things used to be, usually. It's where scenery is. There's a lot of other outdoor recreation opportunities available that can be packaged with food and farming or agriculture. And this is the epitome of the slow life, which is a concept espoused by the slow food group. So that sounds wonderful, right? Well, there are actually quite a few issues that need to be looked at by rural areas. So, a lot of times, people coming to your area don't know anything about the dishes or the customs, which might even be shocking to people, especially things that might happen on a farm. Language and communication can be an issue, especially in countries where people are not speaking the same language as the visitors. They it's not common for people in rural areas to speak multiple languages. So there may be communication issues. And obviously, the visitors are going to need some kind of transportation. And then things like infrastructure, Wi Fi, roads, emergency services are just not plentiful in the rural areas. But that's also part of the charm, right? That's one of the reasons why we go to rural areas is to disconnect and unplug from society today. Then, when we look at a region like a wine region or sometimes a region of a smaller country, a recognized region, that usually means that the region has got it together. They've pulled together somehow, and there's a clear focus on the region as a whole. You're not going to typically see a lot of fusion culinary influences. That's going to be more at the city level, but you're going to see a lot of focus on the region. So people using products from the next valley over or down the road, that kind of thing. There can be some smaller cities and towns located in the regions, which actually is really good for a balanced visitor experience. And we also see at this level the cooperative marketing that can take place between cities and rural areas. Now, some of the issues again are the transportation. You have some of the same infrastructure issues. You have some of the same language issues, and there could also be potentially very long distances involved. And a lot of times, people don't understand how far it is to travel. So you have people who might be in Barcelona and think they'll just drive to Madrid for a meal and go back to Barcelona that same day. Not going to happen. It's not possible. A lot of visitors who come to the United States don't have any concept of the distances involved, so they think that they'll go from San Francisco to Portland for dinner, and that's not going to happen either. So the distances can be quite huge, and sometimes it's helpful in destination marketing in these situations to talk about travel time as opposed to mileage. So it's going to take you 10 hours to make that journey by car instead of it's 500 kilometers. Now, smaller cities, things are starting to change at this level. You see, there's fewer people and less traffic, and often the costs are lower than the bigger cities. It's easy for people to get around and experience more because there's more to do. You're typically seeing better Wi-Fi and better 4G service, but oftentimes these smaller cities are much, much harder to get to than gateway cities like using Spain again, Madrid or London or New York or Chicago or Sydney or Tokyo. These are gateway cities. Very easy to find flights to these cities. Not so easy to find flights to the smaller cities. And if you do find flights to the smaller cities, they tend to be pretty expensive. So let's look at some of the negatives. Well, what we just talked about, It's harder to get to these smaller cities. That's also part of the charm. It's such an effort to get there that once you're there, it's almost a sigh of relief. Sometimes in the smaller cities, neighborhoods may not be as obvious. They may not be charted on a map. There are fewer opportunities for experiences than you might find in a bigger city. And also, people are not going to spend as much time in a smaller city. They might stay for a day or two, and then they're going to move on to see something else. One thing you also experience at this level is visitors who are used to the big city experience. So people who come from London or San Francisco or Singapore, Hong Kong. When they go to more smaller towns or rural areas, they may have a tendency to roll their eyes a little bit. Oh, well, it's not like at home. But I think the message there is to help them to understand that no, it's that's right. It's not like at home, and you need to unplug, and that would be the marketing message there. So mega cities, what's going on there? Well, this is a completely different food tourism experience where you have multiple cuisines, multiple immigrant influences, multiple fusion cuisines, many more opportunities for things for people to do from a food and beverage perspective. Language and communication tend to be much less of an issue. Public transportation tends to be pretty good. Maybe not so much in the United States, but in many European cities, for example, the public transport is quite good, and even walking may be possible. You tend to have no problems with transportation in or out of the region, and you have good Wi-Fi and cellular coverage. Now, in the big cities, some of the issues are the much higher cost, a lot more people, a lot more traffic and noise, sometimes too much to do. People can't make a decision because there are too many options. The visitor can feel overwhelmed with this. And sometimes too what you see is the tourism offices in some of these bigger cities may be very confident of their offerings, and that's not a good thing to happen when the destination rests on its past accomplishments. You must continuously innovate, and I'm not talking about relying on your restaurant partners to innovate with their cooking. I'm talking about the marketing efforts that are put out there. Things must continually change and evolve to be interesting for visitors. Of course, you have the issues of over tourism in some of the more popular cities. And here's one for sustainability is the excess garbage, not just the food and drink itself, but the packaging waste. I have memories of being in New York City a few years ago, and I was appalled at how the level of garbage had grown since when I had lived in New York just about 15 years before that. You had every day at the end of the business day, you would have garbage that was about almost 2 meters high stacked on the street and about a meter and a half to 2 meters wide back from the curb of the street. And these were all plastic bags. This was all disposable throwaway junk. And it was shocking because when I lived in New York just 15 years before that, I had never, ever seen anything like that. So we had talked about the customer journey in one of our talks yesterday, and I just wanted to remind you of what it is. I'm not going to go over this in detail because we're short on time, but it's the pre-trip, on-trip, post-trip experience. So making sure that you think about where your visitors are every step of the way along this customer journey, and remember that everything that happens gets put back into the next visitor who might be coming to your destination. So let's look at some of the strategy issues. Now, there's a lot of information on these slides, so this is the time to really take note and maybe take a photo. One issue that we see is that destinations may not have a food tourism strategy. Well, what are you waiting for? Get started. Start with something simple like an experience assessment and get it done. We don't need a food tourism strategy. Well, that's probably why you need one. You might be too close to your own area to be objective. Our area is known more for beer or wine and not food. Well, food tourism includes beverages. So try to think a little bit outside the box and think about what else you might be able to focus on. Food tourism is a niche or a fad. Well, 93% of surveys of those visitors surveyed in 2016 would disagree with you. For them, food tourism is extremely hot and the interest in food and beverage is only increasing. This is where we get our statistic that almost all travelers can be considered food loving travelers as well today. We know our area best, so we'll hire a local consultant. Well, the problem with that is the people that live locally are blinded by what they already know and they can't see different things. They may not see things that are so obvious to a visitor when a visitor arrives, and that's why you need people with different lenses, different eyes to come in and take a look. We have outdoor recreation, culture, history, and great local food. That's a lot going on. Don't be all things to all people. Most of these destinations have all of these things already. So, what is special about your destination? That is where you need to focus. We're building a brand new 1,000 room hotel in the city center. It will create jobs and bring much needed tax revenue. This is something that we hear a lot of tourism offices very proud to announce this type of news. And in an era of over tourism, I would say that more is not better. I would recommend that the destination focus more on quality instead of quantity. Sure, you're going to be bringing in a lot more heads and beds, but that is increased strain on the infrastructure and system, everything from garbage to sewers to energy and electricity. There's a lot of cost to that as well. And many times you'll see smaller towns, for example, or the main streets of bigger towns changing their complete facade to accommodate the increase in visitor numbers. And when destinations start to change, they lose what makes them special in the first place. We've always been known as the area's premier food destination. Well, again, this is for some of those cities that perhaps have had a great reputation for a really long time. Don't rest on your laurels. Just because you had success in the past doesn't mean that you'll continue to have it. There's a lot of competition out there. So make sure that the experience that people are having today is just as great as it was 20 or 50 years ago. This is one from salespeople. We'll attend 10 trade shows this year, increasing visitor numbers by 50,000 this year and 250,000 within 5 years. I would say that you probably should plan better for success. And when you start talking about these kinds of numbers and then destinations become attractive and people want to move there, especially people going from bigger cities to smaller cities, like you see in the UK, people moving from London to Bristol. You see people from San Francisco in the US moving to Portland, and people from Portland moving to Bend because of all the people from San Francisco moving in. And there's this tug of war going on. But what you're seeing is the bigger numbers are attracting those real estate developers and the multinational chains, and that's not necessarily what you want. You want some level of development, but it needs to be sustained and controlled development. When zoning laws are not in place, or when other conditions are not in place, things will get out of control, and then you again lose what makes your destination special. Now let's look at some product development issues. Everyone loves beer. Well, I would ask you if that is a something that you rest on. I would say, do you really understand your visitors' expectations? Because not everyone loves beer, and in fact, there's quite a few people who drink no alcohol whatsoever. And of course, the wine lovers in the world would disagree with you and roll their eyes. So, food and drink lovers are not all the same. You need to understand how they're different and target your messaging appropriately. So, if your destination is known for its great beer, fantastic. Target beer lovers, but don't target all food loving travelers, because it will be like a complete mismatch. We design our own products in house. Well, don't forget about your residents. They're part of the product development experience, and they're part of the reason why people are traveling to your destination in the first place. So get them involved in product development. We already have restaurants. This is one I see from destinations that typically may not get what food tourism is, and they may be a little stubborn or set in their ways. I would say, do you have the right products to appeal to travelers? I mean, all destinations have restaurants, so just because you have restaurants doesn't mean they're the kind that visitors want to visit. I have been to a tourism destination in the UK that had restaurants, and it was a tourism destination, and I don't want to go back. The people weren't friendly. There was no good food in the town. The scenery was nice, but with those kinds of experiences as a food loving traveler, it doesn't make me want to come back. So don't assume the visitors will be happy with the status quo that you're offering. We need a food festival. This is probably the number one thing that I hear, and I would really put the brakes on this very quickly, because you need to focus on your strengths. Not every town or area needs a food festival. It takes a lot of time to build one. You're building a brand, you're not creating an event, and it's not always the right solution. So please don't just say that we need this and do it. Think about the strategy behind it before you decide that's the path you want to take. We love local. Well, Everyone is doing local these days, so find a new word. It's overused, but also food loving travelers now expect this. They expect everything to be local. So make sure that you differentiate enough. So if every destination, both around you and well beyond your borders, is using local, why am I going to come to your area because you do local? I'm not. It's not special enough. I'm not saying not to use local, but I'm saying that it needs to be combined with something else. There needs to be more value there. We locals love it. Well, if I'm not familiar with the language, or if there's words that I'm not familiar with, like local colloquial or slang words, we get confused really fast as visitors. And don't assume that visitors already know about your primary food and drink products. There may be local specialties that visitors may never have heard of, and they very well may love it, but they need help discovering what you already know. But it's DOP. This you hear a lot in Europe. And I would say don't assume that visitors understand what these designations mean. These are acronyms and there's a lot of value behind what they stand for, but visitors don't tend to get what these mean. I would say it's easier for them to understand a marketing phrase. So maybe this is Italy certified or mucho gusto or something in Spain. It's some kind of a marketing phrase or gimmick that means more to visitors and maybe even locals alike than the highly vaulted DOP, IGP, ETG designations. We can visit 6 wineries in one day. Well, visitors, like we said before, don't always understand the geographies and regions. So I would suggest consider framing distance as the time to get there by car scenario. All right, there's a few more here. We know how to run a restaurant. We don't need training. You may have heard this from some of your partners. Well, do you train your local partners on how to deliver world-class experiences, or do you maybe give them a financial award or reward or a grant or something, and then you need to link that with training? Business owners always need help with product development, sales, and marketing. Things are always changing, things are in flux. Trends, like look at trends in cooking, trends in fashion, trends in music, things are always changing. So, what they knew 5 or 10 or 20 years ago may not be what they need to know today. Our local partners have been in business a long time, they get it. Right. Trends, methods, everything changes over time. Test everyone who insists that they have the experience, and then let them see for themselves that maybe they actually do need to take the free training class you're offering to your partners. We're a gourmet destination. Okay, well, maybe you are. And if you are, that's great and own that. But try not to be, again, everything to all people. So maybe I've seen this in some destinations where the person who worked in the tourism office was a gourmet lover. They loved Michelin star restaurants and fine dining and the white tablecloth experience, but that was their own personal preferences coming out in destination marketing, and that is not that's not going to work for all people. I mean, first of all, think about how many people can sit in a gourmet restaurant. I mean, you're talking maybe 20 people per serving, and that might be once a night or twice a night versus a much larger restaurant. Also, look at the cost. Not everyone's prepared to pay that kind of money. So you might like gourmet restaurants, but your destination might have a lot of other things to offer besides just that. Visitors love Italian food, French food, Chinese food. Well, keep in mind that regional cuisines are not national cuisines, and sometimes visitors get confused and they think a national cuisine is the same everywhere. So you go to Italy. Italy is probably the best example where people think they're going to get the Italian food that they had at home. So whether you're from the United States or Australia or Argentina, which all have huge Italian immigrant populations, when you go to Italy, things are very different. There was an article that came out this week that the mayor of Bologna, Italy, was flattered that his city is known for spaghetti bolognese when it's not actually named after the city because you can't find spaghetti bolognese in Italy. It does not exist. You can have it made for you, but it's not an Italian dish. So again, whether people are coming to your country like China, people don't come to China for Chinese food. They come for um, Hainanese food, or they come for Shanghaiese food, or I don't know all the adjectives of Chinese cuisine, but you see what I'm saying. They come for those regional delicacies delicacies, which vary sometimes tremendously between regions. Our destination offers 180 cuisines. There's something for everyone. Your local residents are going to love that choice. They want to eat Thai and then have French the next night, and then have Japanese, and then have steak, and then have American burgers. And they want that. But visitors typically don't travel for this kind of experience. They want to see and experience what is native to your area. So that's what you should be focusing on, not the 180 cuisines. Our restaurants only use traditional recipes. That's great, but what happens when someone's vegan or gluten free? Things need to be sometimes they need to be changed somewhat substantially. I was visiting a destination and was served a traditional dish, and it was absolutely swimming in oil. I mean, it was that you could take huge spoons of oil out of the dish. And I asked my local contact, I said, is that traditional? And he said, oh, yes, it's very traditional here. And I suggested that maybe the dish could be updated for visitors, that maybe it could be adapted a little bit to use less oil. He didn't like that suggestion. Okay, I'm screwing with a traditional recipe. I understand that. But you have to look at culinary trends. And one of the culinary trends is health. And people don't want to eat tablespoons of oil with their dish. So just saying. Right. So let's look at some marketing issues. Now, one thing we hear is that the area residents don't care about food tourism, they already live there. Well, you need to treat the locals as a target market. Involve them as storytellers, hosts, ambassadors, and guides. Uh, a lot of things that you see in marketing are join us, explore, enjoy, and kick back. These are worthless marketing calls to action. They're selling only marketing messages to tell you to do something, to buy something, to do it now, take it now. And that's not what gets people excited. What gets them excited is learning about the local culinary heroes, which could be a chef, it could be a food blogger, it could be the chocolate maker, the cheese shop, that kind of thing, cheese shop owner. That's what makes people want to travel. So you don't need to tell them to come to your area. You need to introduce them to the cheesemaker. And then because that cheesemaker is so unusual and their cheese is also really awesome, then they're going to say, "Oh, I'm going to book a trip there." So let your audience decide for themselves to explore, enjoy, and kick back. We've got award-winning restaurants. Well, a lot of other destinations do as well. So you need to communicate your successes. You need to talk about how people have enjoyed it. Maybe you do surveys of visitors when they depart and you have some data on how well your restaurants are received. So, for example, in Portland, Oregon, we're known for our food trucks, or yes, food trucks, food carts in Portland, food trucks everywhere else in the world. And that's something that people have to do when they go to Portland. It's part of the experience. So they're not award-winning restaurants, but that's a local success story. When you go, it's part of the local culinary culture. We are a food destination. Okay, well, that's casting the net really wide, because a lot of destinations claim this. So the true food-loving traveler doesn't know anymore which is really the great food destination, because all destinations want to be everything to everyone. All destinations have food. So what's special about your destination's food? We have local. We already talked about that. So what I would suggest is to consider doing psychoculinary profiling to fine tune what your messaging is. So tune into a specific subset of food loving traveler. We talked a little bit about psychoculinary profiling yesterday. It's basically food purchasing behavior by consumers. So whether you look more at the ambiance, or maybe it's more important to you that something is vegetarian or organic, or maybe you're completely new to the experience, or maybe you only value gourmet. Those are particular psychoculinary profiles, and that's what you need to hone in on to get your marketing message right. We have detailed restaurant listings already on our website. Well, sometimes it's really hard for people to find that information on your website. You know exactly where it is, and visitors don't, and they're not going to take too much time to find it out. A lot of times, I'll see on destination websites a list of restaurants by name, and that means nothing to a visitor. I have no idea what these places are. It's irrelevant. I would not even spend time on that page, because I would have to click and open each link to read about the restaurant if there's even information to be clicked to. Maybe you're already duplicating the effort of a TripAdvisor in this regard. And I would say to plan with information architecture and user experience experts to really understand the kind of information should be putting out there. So rather than a restaurant listing on your website, I might talk about your restaurants as a theme and put that on your website with some of your local heroes. So maybe you have three chef stories, and you have maybe a winemaker story, and whatever it is, but maybe like nine stories, and that's how you tell the story about what there is to do in your destination rather than a meaningless restaurant list. We just launched a brand new restaurant guide. Well, if a restaurant guide is your destination's only offering to food loving travelers, I would say forget it. Focus on the experiences and the local heroes. A restaurant guide, again, is meaningless, whether it's on a website or in print. Hey, foodies, visit our area, or our area is great for the vegans. I've heard that one. Um, a lot of people whose native language is English don't like the word foodies. It's very polarizing. Some people don't mind it. Some people laugh at it. Some people absolutely hate it. Some people think foodies are snobs. And it means so many different things to so many different people. So always avoid the word foodies. You want to say food lovers or food loving travelers. Food lovers is very safe. And you don't want to say things like you vegan or gluten-free people. You want to talk about special dietary needs or concerns. We had a speaker yesterday, Concetta from Italy, who talked about unconventional travelers and their unconventional cuisine, and that was what the message she was conveying was about, was that these are people who require different dietary needs. Visit our area, but you don't talk about the areas next door. So sometimes your destination is too small to attract people. Visitors need more to see and do when they're there. So partner with nearby destinations. And if they won't partner with you, you reach out to them first. We have stunning videos. Okay, let's talk about that. Do you really want to spend 100,000 US dollars on a video storytelling campaign? I've seen that you can get about 90% of that stunning work for about 10% of the price. And if you've got tons of money, great, then buy that $100,000 video storytelling campaign. But I would guess that even if you had that kind of money, you would probably be happy to save $90,000 of it and just spend $10,000 on videos that are really good, but maybe not outstanding, perfect, stunning. Just something to think about. All right, so this is all nice, all of everything we've been talking about, but it all needs to bubble up into a brand. So you can have a food tourism strategy or action plan, you can have great efforts of product development and marketing, but what's your overall brand? And this is where sustainability becomes important, because you have to talk about how your brand goes into the future. As a destination, you want to be known not just this year for your restaurants, but you want to develop a reputation as maybe one of the world's best vegan destinations. Okay, that's the kind of thing you should be striving for. Is your brand? Think about your overall food forward brand. What is it that you're trying to put out there to the world? Now let's look at some opportunities for destinations. Some of the opportunities include things like new technologies, and I won't go through all of these here, but some things like drones or augmented reality, these are things that are already working their ways into destination marketing. And again, take a photo if this the kind of thing that would help you later to look at, but this might be something, and all of these have application in food and drink. It may not sound like it, but segways. I have seen food tours given on a Segway. And if you don't know what that is, it's that thing where people stand on it and it moves around for them. It's like, well, you just have to Google it, Google what a picture is. Okay, now I'd like to talk a little bit about something that I call brand guardianship. And here you'll see some excerpts from our State of the Food Travel Industry report that you can download on our website. I'm not going to read that to you, but I'm going to share you a little story. There is a soup manufacturer in the United Kingdom that is called the New Covent Garden Soup Company. And when you see that packaging, you think, wow, that's really cool. I love Covent Garden. I love the history. I love London. I'm going to buy that soup. Well, that soup has nothing to do with Covent Garden. It is not made there. It is not sold there. The company's corporate headquarters are not there. The company did not start there. All the company did was take a name, a place name that has substantial equity, and slap it on their product. And that is really bad. So if I was the Comet Garden people, I would be going after this company with a team of lawyers. You need to protect your brand. And places like Champagne or Parma in Italy have already done that. And so if you have champagne, champagne is only from Champagne, France. Otherwise, it's sparkling wine. So think hard about your brand and what steps you can be taking. You might have to involve the local government as well as the tourism office. So preserving and promoting authenticity. This was another thing in our state of the industry report. And again, I'm not going to read all of these things to you here, but I would say that the number one takeaway from this slide is that authenticity is often overused. And what if everyone in the neighboring areas is starting to offer the same product or experience that you do? What if everyone is calling it authentic? How authentic is it? How are you defining authenticity? Be clear about that. Be clear about what it is exactly you're offering. Because when you say local and authentic, the food loving visitor will at first pay attention, and then when they see there's nothing there, they're going to roll their eyes and they're going to say, "Shame on you." Gastro diplomacy. This is something that we identified several years ago as an emerging trend, and it's only starting to take root and become more important. But it's involving the local residents, the local culinary heroes to help serve as a bridge between the local area and visitors. And you know, you can put people down at a table and give them food. And food is a language. It's an international language. You don't have to speak the same language, but when people sit across from the table and they smile because they like the flavors of what they're eating, that's gastro diplomacy at its simplest form. Now, talking about sustainability specifically, again, packaging waste can reduce visitation. Here we have a picture from the Dead Sea. This was shown in yesterday's presentation, but I have to say that it is something that is so off-putting to food-loving travelers now, it can ruin a destination experience. So if you don't have a solution in place, get one. And just because recycling is not done in your area, or just because sustainable cutlery and utensils are not available in your area, that's not an excuse. You got to make it happen. All right, let's look at building out a food tourism strategy. So we talked about sustainability, and what do we mean by a sustainable food tourism strategy? Well, I just put the common definitions of what each of these is here on the screen. You can read it for yourself. But what I would like to point out is when you talk about a sustainable food tourism development plan, sustainability can mean one of two things. It can be green and environmentally friendly, or it can be long lasting. And I think we really mean both here, but ultimately, I'm really for us, the reduction of packaging waste and being green, that's perhaps a smaller segment of sustainable food tourism development strategy. We really are talking about the long lasting, the environmental, economic, and social impacts that extend throughout the destination, that permeate like a wave throughout the time that your destination is being developed. So we have developed within our association a 4D destination development process. And I'll just briefly touch on it, and again, take pictures if you want. But when we work with destinations, we discover the situation, we deliberate findings, we develop recommendations, and we deliver the plan. And I'll go into each one of these now. But before we do that, ask yourself some of these basic questions. Do we have a unique selling proposition? Have we done an asset inventory? Are we ready to develop food tourism? Do we have narrative in place? Do we have an idea of what our narrative should be? These are the kinds of questions you should be asking yourself before you get started. So, first one, discover your situation. This is typically where we do inspections and interviews, assessments, and one of the nice things that we do is we create a readiness score for the destination. But this is when you're assessing, you're seeing what's available, you're seeing how ready a destination is to go down this path. Remember the food tourism destination life cycle with the bell curve? Same kind of thing. This is where you're at the very beginning and you're saying, okay, what's out there? What can we do? Deliberate your findings. This is when you start to analyze. So you've done your research, you've done your assessments, you're starting to analyze it. You might need to do some more unique research, custom research, and that's also when you can do benchmarking or your psychoculinary profiling research as well. This is where you're doing the analysis, you're processing, you're thinking about what else you need to get the full picture to be able. This is like when you're baking a cake and you realize that, oh, you don't have baking powder or vanilla. You need to go to the store and get those. Same kind of thing. You need your benchmarking comparison. You need your psychoculinary or whatever it is, whatever in your specific case you need. This is when you finish that out. Then you need to define your USP, your unique selling proposition. And here are some examples of things that can be a USP. But whatever it is, you need to define that and own it. Segment precisely. This is what we mean by the psychoculinary profiling. And typically, well, people have three psychoculinary profiles, and destinations do as well. And so, in the last strategy we did for a city in England, we found that they had a specific mix. And that then, when you know that, that's when you can start to turn your narrative into a story that will appeal to that kind of people. Because if you're a gourmet person and you're not a gourmet destination, but you're calling all foodies, gourmet people are going to think, oh, that sounds great. And they're going to come and they're going to say, oh, there's nothing here for me. Same with any of these different kinds of food loving behaviors. So phase three is to develop the specific recommendations. So this is when you're developing your strategy, you are creating the action plan, which we look at as a subset of the strategy. It's like the top level of, so your strategy is here and the action plan bubbles up, and that's your action plan here. It's what's sent for public dissemination, basically. This is where you have your marketing and engagement plans, your timeline, and your budget, and you're deciding who is going to do what in your community. And then you've got your custom plan that is delivered. So that those are the detailed plans that we just talked about, delivering it to your stakeholders, integrating back into your main strategy, because you can't just have a food tourism strategy on its own. It has to be part of the larger destination strategy. You learn from your experiences and your failures and mistakes, and you fold that back into the next strategy. That's what we call the continuous process of improvement, or CPI. And that's what your ultimate goal should be. When you are, after you've delivered a strategy, you want to always refine it. So wrapping up, just to remind you about some dates that are coming up, make sure you know about those in our industry. And I think now is time for some questions. So, while you're thinking of your questions, we had talked about the state of the industry report. So I'm just going to put this on my screen right here. So this is where you can download it for free. You go to our website, you go to intelligence, and then when you drop down to annual industry report, and then you'll get this page. You can just fill that out and get your own copy. So it's 41 minutes after the hour. I predicted it would be about 40 minutes. It was a lot of information. I know I spoke quickly, but there was so much information to convey to you. So go ahead and send in your chat messages, your questions into the chat. And while we're waiting for that to come in, I'll just remind you that we are going to be summarizing what the top points that each speaker has conveyed in our key takeaways PDF that will be sent with the links to the recordings next week. And in that, we will be talking about things like our 4D destination development process. So that at a very top level will be included in the takeaways. But if there's anything that's in the details of that, it's not enough space in the takeaways document. If anyone would like to see another slide, again, to take a photo that maybe you missed it, let me know. We'll go back to that slide for you right now. No questions. You're all experts on a sustainable food tourism strategy. Good. Well, my final word to you then would be to not just to think about the sustainability from a green perspective. So the food and beverage packaging waste, the food waste, the over tourism, and the strain on the infrastructure. Even though those are general tourism problems like the over tourism and the infrastructure issues, but they affect food loving travelers just the same. And the food waste and the packaging waste are unique to the food and beverage industry and food loving travelers. So that's something that we need to embrace and plan for. And you might think, as a destination marketer, this isn't something I need to worry about. That's something the restaurants should be worrying about. Well, no, when visitors won't come to your destination because it's dirty, then it becomes your problem as well. So, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up then. Our next session starts in 15 minutes, and go ahead and look at the Excel spreadsheet for the next URL to log into. We're using different URLs for each session, so we can do individual recordings of each speaker. So thank you all for your time today. It was a pleasure, and I will look forward to seeing you soon in 15 minutes for our next speaker. Thank you very much.